Hello, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm excited to share with you a special regenerative sticking point episode that was recorded by a stream in my local woodland. My guest Harrie and I explore how to pursue a creative regenerative project while still paying the mortgage. We talk about the importance of taking things one small, joyful step at a time, the power of starting with why, and how to shift from thinking about a project to actually doing it. Together, we map out a plan to take Harrie's concept of photography-based storytelling for local land workers and turn that into a reality. Now, wherever you are in the world, whatever stage of your regenerative career journey you are in, you are so welcome to come on the podcast and work through your sticking point with me, just like you're going to hear Harrie doing today. Maybe you're struggling on how to narrow down your many interests and choose a focus for your career. Maybe you know exactly what you want to pursue, but you just don't seem to be able to take action on it. Or perhaps you're simply stuck on the financial piece and can't see past how you're going to make the money work. Whatever your regenerative sticking point, I am here to help you. Go to regenerativeworklife.com/sticking point and choose a time that suits you. We're going to do 30 minutes of coaching together and you'll be amazed at how much you can unlock in that time. You'll leave the session with actionable steps and a clearer roadmap for your regenerative career, and you'll help other listeners who can learn from your experience as they listen to the podcast. So don't overthink this. Go to regenerativeworklife.com/sticking point and book your free on-air session right now. Hello and welcome to another Regenerative Unsticking Point episode. Today I am joined by Harrie, who is not only from the UK but from the same part of the UK as me. So we are in fact, as you can probably hear, out in nature today, and we are going to do today's coaching here in the woods by the stream, which is a bit of an experiment and a special treat. So Harrie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your sticking point and how we can help you today.
So I've worked in a variety of jobs over the last 10 years, and I've always had a kind of contract job that, provides me with all the kind of safety net of having a pension and all of these good things like sick pay. And I felt quite unfulfilled in these jobs, even though on paper they've been interesting and I guess good and charitable and all this stuff, and I would kind of like to explore how I could start my own project and maybe what to focus on, I have a few ideas, but I'm not really sure what would suit me best, perhaps, so maybe exploring that.
Okay, so it sounds like you're a bit of a kind of point of change with your contract ending, and you've got some different options, some different ideas ahead of you, and it's just narrowing in on what's going to be the right choice for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Along these lines. Yeah.
So when we have a question like that in terms of what route should I take, what option is best, I think it's a really good starting point to think about some parameters. So when you say what will be best for me, what are the kind of factors that you're thinking of?
I currently have a desk-based role, which I don't mind in moderation, but I find it quite difficult to concentrate the whole time. So I'd like to choose something that's a bit more interactive. I sit in my office like all day alone, so it would be good to interact with the community, and I would like to be more embedded in the community, and be a bit more kind of hands-on. I like the kind of flexibility of having computer work, office work, but also being outside and being in nature when I can be. So a bit more of a hybrid style, I suppose.
So something that's more deeply embedded in community, something that has more of a sort of human interaction than you're having now, and perhaps you still want the flexibility that you have with your desk-based role, but something that gives you the opportunity to be a bit more hands-on and immersed in nature.
Yeah.
Okay. So give me an idea of, let's imagine that we've met up here in the woods and it's 6 months from now. So today is a beautiful, warm, sunny day. Let's imagine it's going to be sort of a crisp, wintry day with some frost on the leaves around us. Where do you want to be in 6 months' time? And actually, let me just clarify a little bit. I'm not looking for sort of concrete details, but can you give me some of the sort of ingredients that you would like to have in your life in 6 months' time?
So I'd like to work somehow with land workers, so people who are small-scale farmers or have livestock and who are kind of doing things that are good for our planet and have a conservation focus, like conservation grazing or, all the different things. And I'd like my role to be quite creative and involve photography in some way and showcasing these different local change makers who aren't platformed and are often, underrepresented. So yeah, something along these lines. So 6 months is quite soon.
But it sounds like I know you sort of started by saying, like, I don't know, when you were first talking, it seemed like quite a sort of blank sheet of paper, but it sounds like you do have some quite tangible ideas of what ingredients you want to go into this. My sort of ears pricked up when you mentioned photography, because that's kind of quite an unusual element to bring in, and, you want it to be local and, helping to promote these local change workers. Do you have a sense of how this might start to come together, or does that feel like a puzzle you aren't able to piece together quite yet?
So I've recently started like a small WhatsApp group with people who are doing things locally, and I'm quite clued in with land workers locally. But the photography element is, to do with social media, really, because but there's like some really visually sounding beautiful examples locally that I just think would be so important to capture. So, I mean, recently I bumped into a farmer in Brightlingsea who farms buffalo on the marshes, and he uses the buffalo to clear this invasive species on the marsh, and just I can't even fathom what that would look like, but I know it would be really beautiful to capture. And I know people who've just started up market gardens, who run flower farms, who haven't been born into farming or in like heritage land, but are really giving it their best shot because they know it's important and it's kind of what keeps them going. So I think visually it's really important to capture what they're doing, but I also kind of have the conservation background and an understanding of agriculture from my work that can help kind of maybe explain why people are doing things in a certain way and why it's good to let buffalo walk on marshes. But yeah, kind of wanting to like translate why these people are doing these things into kind of very snapshotty, like bite-sized pieces for people to kind of understand what's going on locally and have a better appreciation for local food and produce. So this is one idea, which is very... Yeah.
I mean, but do you hear, like, it's a pretty fully formed idea.
It is a pretty fully formed idea.
I'm curious because it seems like you really, I mean, you're clearly really passionate about this. You already said you have skills already that you're going to be able to bring to this. You're making the connections with those land workers. What is getting in your way of moving forward with this concept?
Confidence in my knowledge and abilities, and just, I guess, kind of the first steps are always hard to take, but I think financially as well, like knowing how this would become something that I can do while having a mortgage. Yeah, so I guess the financial side of things are not thought out, and I'm not a business person by nature. So
okay, well, I mean, I think those kind of fears that you've expressed are the most common things that I hear when someone has a sort of a regenerative yearning or concept that they want to bring to life, or path that they want to follow. The most common things that I hear are either that people think they don't have the right skills and experience, or they just don't know how they're going to make the money piece work. So I think, you're in good company. This is, usual stuff to be feeling at this point. Let's start with the piece around skills and experience, because you mentioned you do have an agricultural background. So are there particular elements where you feel like, I really don't know how to do this, or I'm not sure I'm qualified to do that?
So I think it's more a communication issue sometimes. So I'm not sure I'm the most personable person to be going and meeting these farmers, but I feel like it's maybe a collaborative thing I can do with other people who have these skills. So does that answer the question?
So making the connections themselves feels like a challenge.
I mean, I guess like I kind of broadly have some, but I guess also communicating with people my idea and making it worthwhile for them to take half a day out of their busy day to talk to me about their work, and I suppose that.
Well, so let's focus in on that. What is in it for them to take that half day out?
An opportunity to showcase their work, but for free.
Does there have to be anything more than that?
No, I suppose not. Yeah, there's that's about it really, I suppose.
And on the agricultural side, do you feel like there's an imperative for you to have a depth of knowledge in order to be able to have these conversations?
I feel like I have quite like a sufficient knowledge of a lot of things. I mean, I used to work in market gardening, and I've grown flowers before, and I've run small farms, but I've never worked with livestock, for example. I have a kind of basic understanding of some of the work that my friends do with cows in Sudbury, for example, like on the marshes. Like it makes sense, and I feel like it's all quite. It is, yeah. I feel like I have enough knowledge to bring up and understand the concepts that they're trying to translate to me, and I think I can capture it in a way that is easily digestible to someone who might not know anything about the subject.
So I'll be really straight with you. When you describe this, I'm like, what's in the way here? Because the concept seems really fully formed. You said you might struggle to share your idea with other people, but you've just done that beautifully with us. It's completely clear to me. It seems quite a unique proposition. You've already made some connections. You, like you say, you have enough of the sort of understanding the language to be able to sort of begin these conversations. I'm wondering, what would it look like just to begin?
I mean, I guess I can just start with the social media and talking to a few key people to like get a few people under my belt and try and communicate what I want to get from working with them. I think, my biggest hurdle was just the first steps and confidence, and not wanting to waste people's time.
Yeah, and all that is really valid, and you might find that some of those issues around, where you're not feeling as confident and secure as you would like, that diminishes when you actually start taking those first steps. So why don't we look at that? What would it look like if for right now we're not thinking of how you turn this into a business or how you scale this, just how you begin to tell these stories? What would the very first steps look like?
Mapping, like who I know and where they are, and figuring out kind of what questions or what themes I want to reveal from talking with them. Like I want to talk about how these are quite simple, obvious solutions to our climate crisis. So I guess, having some questions that I've thought out quite sensibly, going and meeting a few people without even considering this idea thoroughly and just kind of walking around with them on their site and seeing how that feels.
Yeah, I wonder if you could almost think of it as like a pilot project at this point. Like the way you're describing makes me kind of think of if I were putting together a very early stage business plan that it's really just about kind of proving viability, to use very kind of commercial language, but it's really like to prove to yourself that this is something, because right now you're grappling with questions of, is this something I could go full time in? Like, can I do this and still pay the mortgage? Like, what's my next best choice when it comes to when this contract finishes?
Yeah.
But it seems to me like that maybe there's a step before that, which is just about, can you test this out, give it a try, put some of it into practice, and then use that learning to then make these decisions? Because obviously the idea is powerful for you and powerful enough for you that you've given it a lot of thought and it's really started to take shape. I think the next stage might be just to kind of test it out a little bit.
I think that my thoughts are quite easy to run away, and I've already thought about how I might photograph this buffalo in a marsh, but I haven't. It's quite, the first steps are the
right, and that's the passion piece, and that's really important, right? Because that's your vision for it, and when you in some ways that kind of mental image that I imagine you have of that buffalo in the marsh is what's going to kind of inspire you to then put in this work. But it sounds like there are some kind of concrete steps that you could take, like you've just outlined, of like, right, can I map down what are the projects that I'm aware of right now and who would I be speaking to at those projects? What might be the sort of basic format when I do this? How much time am I asking from someone? And also a question that came up for me is like, are you clear on who the audience is for these stories?
I would like them to be like local people who are like green-minded and are concerned about climate change, and we know that like 80% of the population are. But I guess a broad audience of local people who have seen the like local farmers market and thought, oh, that looks interesting, but why on earth would I pay that much money for it? And I guess it's kind of putting a story behind some of these brands that are local and amplifying the work that they do, because working in inland work is incredibly lonely. You often don't talk to people for days. So I think for the land worker to actually be able to voice what they're thinking about every day and what their concerns are and why they do this for their livelihood, that's what I want to communicate with people, and for people to feel emotional connection to that and the land and the place that they live.
I mean, that's your why right there. That is, I'm sure you've heard the concept of starting with why. It's, that people, we spend a lot of time thinking about what is it you do, how are you going to do it, but actually what people are really connected with is the why behind what you do. And I think when you're really clear on that, as you are, because you articulate it really powerfully, when you come back to that, all of those kind of details that right now feel like they're in the way for you, they don't carry so much weight, and they certainly won't from the people that you're connecting with. When you really understand why you want to go and speak to that farmer and why you want to photograph the buffalo, that is going to come across to the people that you're asking to take part in this, and it's going to come across to the people who you're sharing the stories with. So let's come back to those first steps. You said mapping it out, so let's start with mapping it out. Is that something that you feel like you can actually just go and do, or do you have more questions about that part?
I think that mapping works well because I'm very visual, and making it kind of like a creative exercise would definitely entertain my brain.
Great. Okay, and let's go even more specific, because I think that first action points are such an underestimated part of when we want to make these kind of big changes or big new ventures in our lives, is that it's so easy to sort of assume that first action piece will just happen, but that's often where people get really stuck. So I like to get really specific on the details of this. So when you think of it as a creative project, can you kind of paint me a picture of where you might do this work, what kind of setup you might have?
When I was younger, I always used to do my creative work in the evening, and like I'm a night owl, So on the floor in my living room, probably, with stuff spread out on the floor.
Great.
Yeah,
on the floor in the evening, some creative materials kind of
scattered around, like my brain.
Yeah.
And then I kind of put it all in one sheet of paper and piece it all together.
Great. How does that feel, thinking of doing that?
It feels like quite a joyful idea, and something I don't do enough of at the moment. Creativity, basically.
Yeah. I think the joy is a great clue to follow the joy. And when you've got your map, one of the other things that you talked about was kind of making some first connections. So we've mentioned the buffalo several times. Does that feel like a good starting place, that particular project?
Maybe not, because I don't actually know him as well as other people. So I probably start with 4 or 5 people I actually know very well, just for my comfort level, who are also doing lovely things. Maybe not as picturesque, but yeah. A friend's just started a market garden up the road, and is really in tune with his land. It's in an orchard, like a huge orchard, and he's got this pocket of land, and he's just started a community-supported agriculture. And then I've also got a friend who's doing brilliant stuff with conservation grazing along a meadow, and he's recently found this flower that hasn't been seen on this meadow for like 100 years because of the way he's been managing it. So, I mean, I'd start with people I know very well, I think, just for my own confidence.
And do you feel like you could already reach out to those people? And have you shared this idea with any of them yet?
No.
Okay. So what would it take for you to do that?
I think I'd want to kind of write up a brief, so I've got all my ideas on a page, and then kind of condense that and message them individually just to come and visit. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got kind of 3 concrete action steps. So doing your mapping on the living room floor, writing up this brief that's going to be something that you're going to share with people, and then obviously sending that out to them to go and make those visits.
Yeah.
How does that feel as a plan?
It feels doable, and it feels like something I could try doing on my half day off a week. So within my current work, I can probably prioritise doing this. And yeah, it feels nice to have an idea for a project that's completely mine rather than working for someone else or always doing someone else's ideas.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us quite nicely to, because you mentioned, the financial piece, and how do you kind of pursue these passion projects when you have to pay a mortgage, which is, very, very often the case for most people in this position. That's the sort of challenge that they're trying to meet. And I think the way that you're approaching it is exactly how I would recommend, is that you don't start out by putting the pressure onto this passion project of needing to provide financially. I absolutely believe that could come with time, or that could lead to new ideas or new opportunities that can be something that supports you financially. But I think right now, if you can set things up in a way that this is, something that you do alongside a job that is kind of paying the bills, then that's really going to allow you to immerse yourself in it without kind of coming back to that, because you're always going to have that sort of dialogue in your head of like, oh, well, this is all very well, but am I going to make any money from it? So if this is something that you can get started up with now, I think you mentioned your contract finishes in March.
Yeah.
So you've got a little bit of time there while you've still got that contract, and you can see how it develops. You can see, come March, is it the right choice to take another contract? But even if you do, perhaps you can prioritise making sure that there is space for this project. So once this is a bit more fleshed out in a few months' time, you might know, okay, well, I need 2 days a week for this project, and then I've got 3 days that I can do on a different contract.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think my learning curve, what's the word? My take-home learning message from my current role is that I really don't work well doing a full-time job, and I don't think anyone does. So if I can condense my hours or do something that's more part-time next time. It definitely suits me better.
Yeah, and that's really good information, and that will give you the focus that, yeah, not only does it suit you better, but it's going to allow you to explore other creative pursuits.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me, like, bring all this together for me. How is it feeling? Do you have any sort of doubts that are surfacing as you're talking this through?
It feels pretty exciting. I think I get carried away with ideas, so it's nice to kind of take it back and figure out the first steps. But yeah, it does really feel like kind of a nice kind of amalgamation of all the different projects I've done throughout my life. It has a lot of diversity in location and place and people, so that will keep my interest sparked, I think.
A lot of those ingredients that you were looking for.
Exactly, yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention when you said about getting carried away with ideas and how it feels nice to sort of come back and focus on first steps is that I think the more specific and small you can be with those steps, the more success you will find. So that's why I sort of had you paint that picture of I'm going to be, on the living room floor, it's going to be spread out all around me in kind of creative chaos. That's really important because you already sort of have, you can visualize how you're going to do it. But I would even say go one step further. You don't need to do this right now, but later on after our talk, think about specifically when am I going to sit down and do that. Like set yourself a time. So if it's your next half day off from work or some time at weekend, like just get really, really specific. And it might even be, actually I don't have all the materials, I'm going to go to the art shop and get some big pieces of paper. Like just really work back to like what is the very tiny next step
and
that I need to
make
take.
It easy to make these little steps as
That's
well.
exactly it. Because I'm amazed how often people get caught up on just that, the tiniest step and offer, and it's like, okay, I need to like Google it, or or I need to just get that book off my shelf, or I need to pick up the phone and speak to this person. And it's those little steps forward that all add up and then really get us moving forward with these ideas.
Yeah, I feel like I often get caught on the name of the project, which is like the least important thing, probably. But
yeah, and that's okay because it's an enjoyable process, right? To think about. That doesn't need to hold you back.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, can you share with us one action that you're going to take after today, and one sort of thought or realization that you want to hold on to?
I'm going to start with just kind of word vomiting onto a document and getting all my ideas out. And kind of what is the drive? What's the word you used?
The why?
The why.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, like
exactly.
articulating that why.
Because I guess that's quite hard to find sometimes if it is, you're using your own time, and sometimes, it's not always as glamorous what your project is, but it's good to have that why. So having that written down, and I guess kind of following my take-home thing is creativity really appeals to me, so really following that and embedding that into the way I work is probably a good way to go forward.
Yeah, and that can actually be, I really like to think about how we choose the things that are going to guide us. I mentioned joy before, and for me that's always a kind of signpost that you're heading in the right direction if something is bringing you joy. And I think you can find your own signpost, and it sounds like creativity is one of those signposts. So even when you're taking those little baby steps, any opportunity you have for creativity is probably a great indication that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Harrie, thank you for joining me here in the woods on this beautiful summer day and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed this coaching episode with Harrie and being out in the woods with us. Some key takeaways for me were that, number one, please don't ask your regenerative pursuits to pay the bills for you from day one. You need to be free to explore and create that new career without the pressure. Listen to episode 10 for 3 easy ways that you can make money while you pursue your regenerative career. Second takeaway, focus on small steps. That's how you bring an idea or vision to life. Look, you have to take action. It doesn't serve anyone staying stuck in your head. 3, believe in yourself. Harrie and I recorded this episode a little while back in the summer, and as I was listening to it again for editing, I was so struck by the power of her idea, of how important it is to tell stories of how we can feed ourselves sustainably, of how we can restore the land around you. I wanted to learn about the projects Harrie will be documenting. I know it can be hard to have faith that your idea or project has value. It's a real leap of faith, but just know that there are people out there, species out there, life out there that is waiting for you to start. Go and make that start right now. And if you're stuck on that, then your beginning is to go to regenerativeworklife.com/sticking point and book your free coaching session with me today so that we can map this out together. Thank you for listening to the Regenerative Work Life podcast. It's time to put what you learnt today into practice. Remember, you were called to this work for good reason. Nature needs each and every one of us, and you can do this. If today's episode has been helpful, please take the time to share it with someone who needs a little guidance in stepping out of corporate and into regenerative. Learn more about how I can help you find your vision for a work life filled with purpose, impact and joy at regenerativeworklife.com and connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Alyssa Murphy. I'll see you back here soon for the next episode.